Before we get into this video, I just want to point out that this is part 2 of our salad fingers theory, so if you haven't seen the first part, then I highly recommend you go see that. Okay, now that you've seen that, let's not waste any more time and jump right back into this heroin-infested world of salad fingers. Hey guys, my name is DJ, and after the shocking realization of how salad fingers is all about heroin, I take a look at how that idea fits into the actual narrative and story of salad fingers. How is salad fingers being addicted to heroin contributing to the narrative of the story? What is the true drug-ridden tale of salad fingers? So in case you didn't realize, and it wasn't unclear to you, we are actually going to be looking and seeing how salad fingers being addicted to heroin creates a story. So technically what we're doing is creating a story out of salad fingers. And as you can probably see by the amount of time this video is going to take up of your lifespan, it's a difficult freaking task. But it's okay, because I'm here to try to create the story through our own theory. So it's going to be a theory about a theory, and putting that theory into the theory of the story. We're creating a story based on a theory, based on a story. It's very complicated. Okay, first off, I want to point out that the events of Salad Fingers is not in chronological order. So to make it a bit easier, I will retell this story in 3 separate parts. Part A, B, and C. Part A is going to be the prologue. This is before Salad Fingers becomes pregnant, more on that later. Part B is while Salad Fingers is pregnant and the birth of her child. This thing, as we talked about in the previous video. Lastly is Part C, which is more of what happens after the pregnancy and after the birth of the child. Okay, you got that? Good. Secondly, with the whole story being super confusing and jumping through episodes, I've decided to make it a little bit more clear. When speaking about one particular episode of the series, I'm gonna just have a little thumbnail, like right here, so it's a little bit more clear for you to know exactly what I'm talking about and what the events are in the series. Okay, and finally to the big part of this theory, which is a little bit complicated to get through. Salad Fingers, the person, is not one specific character. Throughout the series, he represents multiple characters, but mainly 3. We have
Hubert Cumberdale, Marjorie Stewart-Baxter, and this is Jeremy Fisher.
Now, it is clear from episode 11 that Hubert Cumberdale is actually the baby in the series. And it's clear that Jeremy Fisher seems to represent the father of Hubert, which we will discuss why later. But who is Marjorie Stewart-Baxter exactly? Well, I believe she is the subtle main character of the entire story, and I believe she is the mother of Hubert Cumberdale. Marjorie is very much the most represented by Salad Fingers. But like I said, Salad Fingers is not just one character. He might represent her a ton in the series. Like, most of the story is pretty much from her point of view through the eyes of Salad Fingers. However, Salad Fingers represents everybody in the story, pretty much. The story of Salad Fingers is pretty much just being told through the green monster of Salad Fingers. He is merely a way to relay the story as he switches through characters constantly. So it can be very tricky to know who he is representing at a current moment. But what you really have to remember is Salad Fingers is not one character. He represents everybody. So if you kind of just remember Salad Fingers is merely a way to tell the story as opposed to somebody in the story, then I think this should be a lot easier. It also makes the story just seem like it makes a lot more sense. But yeah, okay, I know what you're waiting for. That's it for the build-up. We are finally getting into the true drug-ridden story of Salad Fingers. Now, to kick off this story, we actually don't start in episode 1. We actually start in episode 2. In episode 2, Salad Fingers introduces us to the 3 main characters, which is what I said earlier, so we don't need to gloss over that too much. But the most important thing about episode 2 is the scene with the oven, the child, and Salad Fingers. What I believe is happening in the scene is that this shows the innocence of Marjorie leaving. The child dying represents a very young Marjorie and a symbolic burning of her childhood for this new heroin addiction life. Before any pregnancy, this is the transformation of a young child who seems healthy-minded, probably into sports based off the jacket, turning to a life of drugs and heroin. You can even see it in Salad Fingers' eyes, the sadness of this memory as she takes her life down into a spiral of heroin and regrets. But now we move into episode 1, the real episode 2 of the series. Episode 1 is much more prologue-y. Nothing really happens in this episode. It shows Salad Fingers actually acquiring rusty spoons, or heroin, as we've called it in the previous episode. It seems like Salad Fingers, or Marjorie, is getting it from a child. I assume this is more of a teenage drug dealer kind of thing. And that concludes kind of part A of this story. The prologue and the introduction to Marjorie's new drug-ridden life. Now, however, we get into the very much more complicated parts of the story in part B. Anyways, we start part B of the story with episode 6. In episode 6, it shows Jeremy Fisher coming back from this great war. When he comes home from this great war, he comes home to Marjorie. He falls in love with her. Secretly from her parents, he eventually impregnates her with their future child, the future Hubert. Don't believe me? This is also portrayed with him giving her a horse. And this horse is kind of a metaphor, it seems, for the act of impregnation. This is also seen in episode 10, which we will discuss more about in a bit. But now that Hubert has finally been implanted into the womb, we move on to episode 4. And episode 4 is a very major episode. It is a very major episode. In episode 4, Marjorie has kind of decided to ignore the pregnancy. So she kind of continues to do her heroin thing. This is not because of the baby. This is because of Jeremy. Now, Jeremy is not very much liked in the Stewart-Baxter household. The dad and mom kind of hate him because, just gonna be blunt and say it, they're goddamn racist. However, the evidence of this, like I said, will be shown later. Trust me. All you have to know is that the Stewart-Baxter parents and family of Marjorie are racist. They're racist against Jeremy. Now, to try and hide this from her parents, she kind of just continues on her heroin lifestyle, just to act normal and act like nothing has happened. She literally and metaphorically shuts out the idea that she's pregnant because she doesn't want her parents to do something super drastic with Jeremy. Like kill him. Anyways, that's how Hubert Cumberdale gets the birth defection, is because of the heroin use by Marjorie. But yeah, this can also be seen in episode 9, where Mr. Branches, voiced by what appears to be a small child, is begging for Salad Fingers to notice him. Anyways, Mr. Branches keeps calling Salad Fingers Daddy, leaving us to assume that Mr. Branches, aka Hubert, is trying to call out towards Jeremy in the womb. It's learned that the mother is messing up the development stages in the womb. It is trying to scream out to anyone who would listen for help. Yeah. Anyways, to end that depression note, let's move on to episode 6. In episode 6, we finally start to see an uplifting change, as Hubert is begging in the womb for someone to help, because the development cycle is being completely messed up from this heroin use. Marjorie finally listens. The episode shows her finally trying to escape this drug-ridden lifestyle that she has created for herself. The toilet, as Salad Fingers was talking to, introduces the idea established in episode 11, with water or mirrors conveying two alternate worlds. One world representing the dark world of heroin and drug use, while the other represents the world of her parents, and the real world without the heroin use. Now, this is much more shown in episode 11, which we'll talk about later, but this feels much more like a precursor to all of that. Next up in episode 3, after she tries to conform to the life of a mother, she goes out and buys a stroller. Yeah, this is one of the more literal parts of the series, with the nettle carrier literally representing the stroller of the future child. And now that Marjorie has finally decided to end her drug use, we move on to episode 10. Like I mentioned earlier, the horse represents the impregnation of Hubert. So in episode 10, the killing of the horse represents the end of the pregnancy and giving birth to Hubert. This scene very easily portrays a birth, as the horse being killed by Dr. what is it? Dr. P. Anyways, as Dr. P kills the same horse that we saw earlier, again representing pregnancy, it is representing the beginning of the end of Part B of our story. From Marjorie being pregnant to finally giving birth. But we're not quite done with Part B, so hold on a second. Now we move on to the big end of episode 10. We watch as Salad Fingers puts on this hat that represents Marjorie finally taking the responsibility of being a parent. This hat, made up of body parts and flesh, quite like how Hubert will also transform into a being made of flesh, signifies her finally trying to stray away from heroin, joining her family, and trying to reform into it to help raise her new young child. This can also be seen in episode 9 when Salad Fingers pretty much spewed out a black goop of disgusting, ew, get off my screen, stop. The two scenes are directly linked to one another. However, Salad Fingers is playing two separate people in these scenes. In episode 9, he is clearly playing Marjorie, as he, gooshes out the black goop of disgusting, aka Hubert Cumberdale. In episode 10, he is playing the role of Jeremy. Jeremy is now supporting his new fiancée as she is giving birth. This is why he goes,
I know it hurts. Just try and sit still.
And now the pain goes away and we move on to Part C, the final part of our story. So, we finally get to episode 8. Episode 8 describes right after Hubert is born, with her spending the entire episode freaking out because of the withdrawal. Also, there's a scene where Hubert gets thrown into a mud puddle. This is when we first see Salad Fingers playing the role of Marjorie's father, throwing this baby into the puddle. He is literally disrespecting the idea of this child. This disrespect by Marjorie's father is because Hubert is not only representation of his daughter's drug use with the whole deformity thing, but also Hubert is a symbol of how his daughter had a baby with Jeremy, a black man. Someone, like I mentioned earlier, he doesn't like due to his race. Remember when I mentioned that his parents are super racist? Well, that's why. This is why he calls the baby
dirty immigrants in my house.
But the racism just continues on through the entire episode, causing Marjorie to cry and feel pressured by the family in this cupboard. And now we get to probably the saddest part of the story. Yeah, this is going to be the most depressing part of the story. Now we see the racism even more, and this time it goes too far. Episode 5 shows Marjorie wanting to get married to Jeremy Fisher, but it never happens. This is because of what happens at the end of episode 6. The father has killed Jeremy before the marriage. Jeremy being murdered by the father is one of the most direct representations in the series, as at the end of episode 6, the father, in this case being played by Salad Fingers, murders Jeremy for impregnating his daughter with a black baby. However, through all of the struggle and mourning for Marjorie, we move on to her mother. That's right, we finally get to talk about episode 11. Now, compared to the rest of the story in all the other episodes, episode 11 is kind of the most direct, so it makes for a very easy episode to cover. This is because pretty much everything in the episode is almost meant to be taken literally. So Salad Fingers, throughout this whole episode, represents Marjorie and Marjorie alone. It shows Marjorie, after the grief, wanting to still be a part of this family. But the mother and brother of Marjorie literally wants nothing to do with her, literally pushing her away. They do not want her to rejoin after the constant heroin use and the fact that Jeremy impregnated her. Now, the reason that I know episode 11 is the last part of the story, at least the most recent part until another episode comes out, is because the dad never shows up. You can look for him in the episode, but the father is never shown in the entire episode. I believe this is because after the killing of Jeremy, he was taken away to jail. This gives the family even more reason to despise Marjorie and Hubert. The mother even tries to take Hubert from Marjorie out of spite. Marjorie then is forced to take this weird black goop. Now what I think that is, might be another form of drug? But the best part about this is, she immediately rejects that. She immediately rejects this idea of taking another form of drug. So after finally overcoming this need and this high for heroin or any sort of drug, she takes back Hubert. She gives him a new life, trying to create a more positive environment. Marjorie, in the beginning of the episode, literally tries to mold Hubert into someone who can love himself. And at the end, they smile. A woman who has left the family trying to grow as she takes care of a young child, Hubert Cumberdale. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of how a green monster represented an entire arc of how a drug-addicted mother turned into a caring one. Now, before you type in the comments, I know that I did not mention episode 7. Now this is because episode 7, in terms of this theory, is very much kind of a throwaway episode. It's kind of just more reminding of the audience that, hey, the Great War was a thing, you know, the thing Jeremy was in. Price, I guess, could be an old friend of Jeremy's and Marjorie's during the war, but besides that, that's kind of it. I guess the other thing to note about that episode is at the end where Salad Fingers goes up on stage. This, I assume, is just the story trying to drive home the idea of Marjorie wanting to go follow a path and follow her dreams and sing on stage. But we already kind of saw the idea of her wanting to follow her dreams when she was like, I want to go to France and stuff. But besides that, that's kind of it. That's all I could really see episode 7 doing. So I don't know, maybe there's more to that. What did you guys think about my theory and how I believe the whole story connects into this heroin-addicted world of Salad Fingers? I know that this convoluted story seems very much like something that I don't really do on this channel. However, when episode 11 came up, I decided that it would be the perfect time to actually talk about Salad Fingers. I wanted to cover this series for so long and I just wanted to dip my toe into it. Or perhaps, instead of dipping my toe, maybe I just wanted to dip my old, reliable spoon. Anyways, that's gonna have to be the end of this video here. Did you guys like it? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to see more of my over-analytic and dorky content, why not check out this video here? And while you're staring at this outro screen, why not click this little subscribe button? Anyways, hope you have a good day, and I'll catch you later. Bye-bye! Yo.